And first I want to applaud you for being here at 10:30 in the morning to hear about organizing, and especially when there's a busy expo going on out there. So you will have time after we're done to go out and enjoy the expo, but for now, we're going to dig in. And I want to start first by a show of hands. I want you to raise your hand if you consider yourself organized. And we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But if you consider yourself organized, raise your hand. Okay, a few people. I want you to raise your hand if you consider yourself disorganized. And now I want you to raise your hand if you consider yourself both organized and disorganized. You're actually right regardless of how you answer. Because A, it depends on your definition of being organized, and everyone's definition is different, and therefore you may consider yourself organized, but let's say Kathy looked at that, she might not consider that organized. And so it really is very personal to each person. The other thing is, I truly believe that no one person, based on being a human being, can be perfectly organized at all times. And so you may have parts of your home, your life, or your work that are organized, and parts of it that are disorganized. It also depends on whether we're talking about the physical realm of organizing or the mental realm of organizing, and we'll get into that in a little while. If I asked you what's your definition of being organized, what would it be? Just go ahead, scream it out.
Knowing where to find my car keys.
Knowing where to find my car keys. Average American takes 6 minutes every morning to find his or her car keys. That's a long time. So that can make the difference between making your train, your kids getting on the bus, making an appointment that's really important to your livelihood, etc. What else? What does being organized mean to you?
Less mistakes.
Less mistakes. Very good. Okay, so in other words, not only your productivity increases, but your competency level, and I'm assuming also maybe it will help you get a promotion, it will increase your reputation, because you're actually making less mistakes. What else?
Being in control.
Being in control. Very good one. And a lot of people, when they call a professional organizer, will say, I can't really explain what I'm feeling, but I feel very overwhelmed and I feel like I'm out of control. So that is a really good one. It's unfortunately a really common one. And Marjorie and I were talking this morning about there are some things that are within your control and there are some things that you cannot control. But the nice thing about being organized, if any of you are baseball fans, is it's kind of like having a curveball come at you. Being organized doesn't mean that you can hit that curveball every time, but it means that you can hit it and try to get back on base a little quicker. So it just sort of sets you up in a way for a little more success. What other definitions of being organized? No one mentioned, which is really interesting, to have more space. And yet that is a big one that we hear. People will call up and say, I'm drowning in a lot of clutter. You know, I bought a McMansion, I live in a bigger house, I have more square footage, and yet I filled it up. And we do tend to fill up time and space when we're given it, which is why a lot of people will upsize. It's really interesting now, the baby boomers are starting to downsize, and they're starting to realize that the stuff may not be as important. Another thing that no one mentioned, which is one of the main reasons that people will seek advice of a professional organizer, is more time. They feel like they're losing time. And the time that you're losing is probably searching for things that you can't find, right? Exactly what Andrea said about, trying to find things in the morning. What are some other examples to you of what being organized means?
Finding the bill of the month before when paying the current bill.
Right. Finding the bill the month before when paying the current bill. In other words, financial organizing and being able to improve your financial health. And being able to find your bills means that you'll be able to pay them on time. And a lot of people don't realize that one of the benefits of being organized is saving money. Because you're not paying late fees, your interest rates are better in terms of your credit score goes up. Usually it also results in a better marriage or business partnership because financial issues are one of the main things that tear people apart. So yes, financial health actually has a lot to do with being organized.
Peace of mind.
Yeah, peace of mind. Yeah, we have a few organizers in the industry. Their business names are things like Peace of Mind and Simple Peace. And yes, it can decrease your stress and it can improve your mental health and mental well-being and give you a sense of peace.
I need to be able to focus. If I have a plan, then I can focus.
Okay,
Good. Attacking something from 5 angles, I get everything done.
I'm really glad you brought that up. She said to be able to focus. And what I want to talk to you about today, we have a little time together, is that a lot of the things that I will be sharing with you, you will know. Okay, and that's not a bad thing. That doesn't mean go home. Because we know a lot of things. And we hear a lot of things, we go, I know that, I know that, I know that. What I want you to do is take the I know that and turn it into I can do that, and move into the action realm. I want to turn up your action volume today so that when you leave here, you don't just know these things, you act on them. Because we all know a lot of things, right? Whether we act on them or not really determines our success. And I was listening to a speaker this morning. I'm in the NSA, which is the National Speakers Association. And what's wonderful is we don't get a magazine only in hard copy. Our magazine is audio, which is really wonderful. Come on in. And so I get to listen to the magazine because if you're a National Speakers Association, you want to hear people talking. And there was a speaker named Lisa Nichols. She was in The Secret, a very famous movie. She's done the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And she was talking about how most of us don't laser focus. Most of us are like a floodlight. So picture a floodlight. It sort of sends a beam out in a very wide range, right? And we've got our hands in 5 things. And I have done a lot of research on and writing on multitasking and how it does not increase your productivity. It's a myth. David Myers out of the University of Michigan is a psychologist who has studied this in detail, and it takes your brain 4 times longer to process and to do things than if you had done one thing at a time. And so what Kathy just said about the laser focus, I want you to think like a laser beam. Okay, I want you to try to laser focus on one task at a time as opposed to trying to have your hands in a ton of things. And so when you leave here today, if you don't know some of the basic organizing principles and skills, I will give that to you. So I'll give you the knowledge. If you're here to hear a content expert, I'll deliver. But for those of you that already know this, I would like this to maybe inspire or motivate you to take I know that and turn it into I'll do that. Okay, so it's a little different. And we tend to get really caught up in the I know that, I know that, I know that, but I want you to think a little more action-oriented. So going back to the definition of being organized, there are many ways to determine your organizing style. I'm going to ask you first, if I said to you, what's your organizing style, would you be able to answer me? And we have a few professional organizers in the room, so I'm going to ask you to be quiet first.
Setting up stations within the home and attempting to creatively and not be bored, work on various tasks, which you just said was not the way to go. But stations within the house, because if you do one task, you can get either overwhelmed or bored, or both.
So the word you use is very interesting. You use stations, and in organizing we tend to use the word zones, and essentially that's the exact same thing as a station. So I liked how you did that. What she was describing is the idea of grouping like items together. So in organizing, they don't like diversity. Items like to be with their friends, okay? So let's so when you think organizing, think like with like. And you do set up these sort of mini zones. They are centers or zones, or as you put it, I love that word, I might steal that from you, stations, very nice. And so these stations around your home, your office, and your life are going to help you not have stragglers left out in the middle of nowhere. So basically these things will be together. Because if I came to your home and I said, hey, where do you keep that? And you said, well, there's a little bit of it here, and a little bit of it there, and a little bit of it there. It means, A, you don't know really how much of that thing you have, which is a problem for most people. Unless they gather the universe together, they're like, they don't really know how much. And then when they gather the universe together, they go, wow, I have no idea I had so much of that stuff. And that's when they sort of feel a little more empowered to start maybe decluttering if they have too much of that item. So that's a really good example of one way to know how to get organized. But what I'm trying to tap into is, any of you know a little bit more about your organizing style? And I'll explain what I mean by that to you if you don't know what I'm asking. Anyone know the 4 primary learning styles? Anyone in education? Okay, go ahead.
Visual.
Visual, bless you. Auditory, good. Tactile. And? Kinetic, I love it. Kinesthetic. Kinesthetic. So those are your 4 primary learning styles. And the reason I bring those up is because that really plays into your organizing style. And I'll give you an example. If you are a very strong visual learner, you might be the type of person whose organizing systems need to stay out. Because if you don't see them, you might not even remember you have them. So So I'm going to talk a little bit about a client I have, Tom. Owns 2 multi-million-dollar corporations. Really great guy. And if you put something in a drawer, literally if I put a piece of paper in a file drawer, it's like black hole, gone. He will never look at it again. He has no idea it's in there. So I had to set up a visual system for him, for his paper. So what I did was went into the files, counted all the hanging file folders, bought what's called a literature sorter, which is like an old-fashioned mail slot system, mounted it on the wall next to his desk, and then labeled what would have been the hanging folders. Now, Tom has been using this for about, 2011? This is my 9th year in business. I worked with him about 3 years since. He's been using this for about 6 years effectively because we tapped into his learning style. Now, somebody else that might drive you crazy. If you took my paper and took it out of the drawer and put it out, me personally, that would drive me nuts. I have a low tolerance for clutter out. I am an innie. All my stuff has to go in. There are outies, and I'm not talking belly buttons. The innies, right, all their stuff is in, and the outies really like to use the horizontal surfaces. If an innie and an outie live together or work together, sometimes we have a massive clash. So if you and your husband, if your spouse, if your wife, kids, business partner, if you're noticing that you're clashing, you may have very different learning styles and therefore very different organizing styles. So start to think about that. Now, if somebody asks me, if I'm a strong auditory learner, how does that play into an organizing style? It's a good question. It's probably one of the hardest ones to organize around. A very small percentage of people, their primary learning style would be auditory. But I'll give you an example. If you leave here today and you start implementing some of these ideas, you will hear my voice in your head saying things like, don't just know it, do it. Or, decide to be organized and go through the process. So if that's something, if you're nodding, that might mean you have a very strong auditory style, and so you need to play into that and listen to podcasts and CDs and audio programs and use mantras and affirmations that you say to yourself to remind yourself to, let's say, keep your habits and organizing systems in place. Another example would be kinesthetic tactile. Those tend to be people that either learn by doing or touching. And so an example of that is, my husband is a computer geek. He actually is a veterinarian for his livelihood, but he's an awesome computer geek. I'm very lucky he does all my IT. And if he wants to show me something, let's say he wants to show me something new in Excel, I have to sit in the chair, scoot in front of him, sit on his lap, put my hands on the keyboard and say, show me. That is a very strong kinesthetic tactile learner because you need to go through the process in order to learn it. And so if that's you, then you will really benefit by having steps in your organizing process. Step 1, do this. Step 2, do that. Either you could flow chart it out, if any of you have ever seen a flow chart, and it would actually show you the steps, and people tend to confuse that with a visual learner. But usually flow charts work really well for kinesthetic learners because it's showing you the steps in a process. If you don't know what you are, then all I've done is raise your little antenna or your awareness, and as you go forth and go forward, just start to pay a little attention to how you learn and to how you'd like your organizing styles to play out. One other thing to think about when you're trying to decide what type of organizing style you have is brain types. What do I mean by that?
Left brain or right brain?
Right brain or left brain dominant, right? Now, we all use our right brain and left brain. At least I would hope so. If you don't use one of your hemispheres of your brain, you probably have a problem. But when you think left brain, what automatically comes to mind?
The thinking part, the other side's the creative side.
Right. The right side is the creative side.
Yeah.
Some people think of Oscar Madison and Felix Unger. Some people think of Bert and Ernie. A lot of studies have shown that Bert and Ernie were supposed to be a right brain and left brain. It's very interesting. So the right brain is sort of the creative side, thinks in ideas and colors, and the left side tends to be very linear and very methodical, and there's numbers involved. It's a lot more sequential mathematical. If you don't know, again, which one you're more dominant in, you can take an exam, you can take a test online for free, just go in and put brain type exam, and it will help you. When you think about some of the geniuses that have lived, like Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo, they were very much using their right brain and left brain because they were able to do these amazing works of art, and yet also they were advanced scientifically and mathematically. Again, if you have someone that's left brain dominant who's working or living with a right brain dominant, their organizing styles may play out very differently. And so these are all things that you need to think about in advance. And the problem with most people is they're like, I want to get organized. They go to the Container Store, They buy a whole bunch of stuff that they don't know if they need, they don't measure, and then they come home and look around and go, what do I do with all this crap? Because now it's just become more clutter. What you need to do is spend a little more time in the analysis phase thinking about, how do I think? How do I work? Do I share any systems with someone else? Do I share systems with family members? Do I share systems with workers? Who's going to maintain the system? Is it me or is it someone that I'm delegating to? These are all the things you need to actually think about before you run out and do the fun stuff like run to the container store. So I'm going to go over with you a process that I've developed called DECIDE. And in my 9 years of working with clients, I have noticed a trend. And the trend is that if you find me a person that's disorganized, usually they're indecisive. They tend to go hand in hand. And the most organized people tend to be quick and efficient decision makers. And the problem right now in our society, specifically in the United States, is we are bombarded with decisions on a daily basis. It's actually a little out of control. And I'll give you a little quick example of how other cultures don't usually have as much problems with this as we do. I'm Italian by descent. My ancestral background is Italian. And my husband and I went to Italy in 2005. And we happen to love Europe. Okay, I happen to be a huge Europhile. Basically, you show me any place in Europe and I love it. And what I love about the Italians is when you think Italian, you think extremely passionate as a culture. They're into food and wine and art and architecture. And they're very passionate people who talk with their hands, right? And yet, they're extremely decisive. In fact, in some ways, they're more decisive than us, which is really interesting. So we arrive in Tuscany, and we're staying at a vineyard. And the innkeeper's name is Francesco Pellegrino. You can't make this stuff up, right? Francesco Pellegrino. And we get there at 2 o'clock. Well, what happens in Italy and other parts of Europe around 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Siesta. Which basically means what?
No service.
No service. Everything shuts down, right? All the restaurants close. Everyone relaxes. They have their family meal. Some of them actually go home. It's lovely, except when you arrive in Tuscany and you're starving at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So we say to Francesco, we're really hungry. Is there any place open for us to get lunch? And he says, sure, La Fatteria. You go down the street. It's really good. You love it. If you don't love it, you don't go back. Done. Boom. Okay? If that was America, I would have been given either a guide of menus or an informational guide of the 50 nearest places, and the person would have said, well, let's see. There's this, there's that, there's this, there's that. What are you in the mood for? But then you could try that, but they don't know until... The problem with having too many choices is that people now in America are so used to this sort of overabundance of choices that they can't actually make a decision anymore. So let me tell you how this plays out in organizing. You're looking through a pile of paper. You're going through those bills, let's say. And you go like this. Oh, I don't know. Maybe I'll need that. Maybe I'll look at that. I'm not sure what to do with that. What am I doing? I'm taking one pile of paper and just moving it to another pile as I don't make decisions about it. And every time you delay a decision about a thing in your life, you cause physical clutter to pile up. Okay? Unfinished projects. I don't know, maybe I'll get back to that. Maybe I'll take up knitting again. I'm not sure. It's been sitting there for 2 years. If I walked through your home and I pointed and I said, without judgment, what is that? Just describe it to me. You would start to describe, without even realizing it, the delayed decision that caused that clutter. Okay? You're rolling your eyes, you're like, oh. The mental clutter. The mental clutter. What do I mean by that? Decisions, right? If you absolutely are having a hard time making decisions, then it also causes mental clutter because all these decisions that you can't make are swimming around in your head. And your time management and project management skills are really lacking because now you're thinking, I don't know, maybe I'll take on that project. I'm not really sure what to do about that. Did I call Susie? Did I do this? And that, you're smiling, that basically causes all of this clutter in your mind. And so basically the process, Decide to be Organized, that I'm going over with you, is a way to clear the physical and mental clutter. You have to be willing to take on the process, okay? And I'll walk you through it. But it's not something, I'm not going to lie to you and say it's something that is cookie cutter, and it's not something that's easy in the sense that you have to be willing to be empowered to make these decisions. And so let's just go through the process a little bit, and then also, if any of you are interested, there is a brochure on that table back there, and on the back of the brochure is the Decide process written out. So if you're interested, raise your hand, and then Andrea can get you a copy of it.